Across the Mexican border, the police are closing in on a ranch just outside of Matamoros, Mexico. They're following a vehicle that has fled from police. Once the vehicle stops, Mexican authorities move in. The Mexican police are searching the ranch, unsure of what they're looking for. But then, they notice it. Just off in the distance, they see a tool shed. It looks dilapidated. Just looking at it fills the officers with unease. As they approach the shed, they start to hear it. The distinct sound of flies. Swarms of them are hovering around the shed, but they have to get closer. And as they walk, they try to tune out the swarm around them. But then just a few feet away, it hits them. The smell of rot. They step inside, and what they found was beyond imagination. Metal chains hung from the ceilings. Blood painted the walls. And just off in the corner, they noticed something else. A cauldron. And inside, the officer discovered the brains of a human.
Well, Terry, authorities tell us that the most serious or perhaps the most dangerous kind of devil worship comes in the form of underground cults. Most of them are very secretive, usually organizing clandestine rituals in the dark of night.
15 mutilated bodies were found at a ranch outside Matamoros, Mexico, where Mark Kilroy disappeared in March. News of the slayings and now the gang's violent end have left the border town stunned. Sunday, the cult's alleged priestess denied taking part in sacrificial murders and apologized to the parents of slain Santa Fe College student Mark Kilroy.
I'm sorry.
Deep in the South Texas borderlands, in March of 1989, the small border town of Brownsville hums with spring break energy. 4 college students prepare to cross the U.S.-Mexican border into Matamoros, a city known for its nightlife and for being a major artery in one of the largest drug trafficking corridors along the Texas border. IDs in hand, they step across into Mexico. And unbeknownst to them, from the moment they arrive, someone is watching. Inside the University of Texas, students prepared for spring break. Amongst these students was a young man named Mark Kilroy. Mark was ambitious. He had earned a basketball scholarship to Tarleton University, but later transferred to UT Austin to pursue a medical degree. Mark had his whole life ahead of him, before it was suddenly cut short. South Padre Island was the party capital of spring break, a place where thousands of college students blew off steam every year. And this year was no different for Mark. Getting a ride with 3 of his friends, they made the trek from Austin to South Padre Island, and upon arrival, the group checked in at the Sheraton Hotel around midnight. The island was quiet. They'd arrived early, but this peace wouldn't last long. Within hours, thousands of students from across the U.S. flooded into South Padre Island. News crews, beer vendors, concerts, and promotional events poured in as the beaches transformed into a chaotic spring break spectacle. Mark and his friends spent the day soaking up the sun, walking the festival grounds and enjoying the early excitement. Later that evening, they returned to the hotel briefly before deciding to head towards the border town of Brownsville. They parked their cars near the Gateway International Bridge, the entry point between Brownsville and Matamoros. From here, they crossed into Mexico and made their way down the party street of Matamoros, Avenida Alvaro Obregón. Their night was spent at Sgt. Pepper's, a local nightclub where they partied until the early morning hours. Eventually, they crossed back into the US, retrieved their vehicle, and returned to South Padre Island. After recovering from the night before, the group continued their festivities, partying along the beach, attending house parties, and soaking in the spring break atmosphere. And by around 10:30 that night, they decided to repeat the night before and return to Matamoros. Following the same routine, they drove to Brownsville and crossed into Mexico once more. But this night was different. Spring break was in full effect. The streets of Matamoros were overflowing with an estimated 15,000 students. Vendors filled the sidewalks, the smell of street food mixed with cigarette smoke, and every bar advertised drink specials as far as the eye could see. Looking for the shortest line, the group entered Los Sombreros, a bar known for its rough reputation. After a few drinks, they continued bar hopping, eventually arriving at the London pub, and this is where Mark separated from the group. And around 2 a.m., the group decided it was time to leave. From here, they tried to make their way out of Matamoros. Thousands of students packed the streets, pushing in every direction. Staying together was nearly impossible. Their rendezvous point was a store called Garcia's, where they would regroup and head home. But before heading that way, Mark turned to Bill and asked his final words. "Is something wrong?" Bill replied, "I'm just tired. Just not in a partying mood." Bill stepped away from Mark for just a moment to use the restroom, and once Bill returned, Mark was gone. But what the group didn't know is that Mark didn't simply just walk off. In later confessions given to authorities, cult members revealed what actually happened in those exact 2 minutes. As Mark stood near the street, one of Constanzo's men approached him, a scout who had been walking the party strip all night. Witnesses later said the man called out to Mark as if he recognized him. Others claimed he offered Mark a ride. But whatever was said, it was enough for Mark to step closer. Then within seconds, 2 more men closed in around him. Mark realized something was wrong. He tried to pull away, but he was outnumbered, overpowered, and dragged off the street, forced into a waiting vehicle just out of sight. All of this, every second of the struggle, happened during the same moment Bill had stepped away. And in 2 minutes, Mark had vanished. The group searched the streets, hour after hour, and as the crowds thinned and the bars shut down, eventually they assumed Mark might have returned to their car. But he hadn't. Unsure of what else to do, they drove back to South Padre Island, trying to convince themselves that Mark might have met someone or simply made his way back another way. But something felt wrong. This wasn't like Mark. Back at the hotel, they slept uneasily. Morning came, and Mark still wasn't there. The panic set in. There was only one thing left to do. They contacted the police. Today's video is sponsored by yours truly. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching my videos. And if you're watching me, then there's a good chance you enjoy other horror content. And well, YouTube doesn't really like our genre very much. So the best and cheapest thing you can do to show your support is to just interact with the video. You have no idea how much this helped small creators. I also want to announce that I have started a Patreon account. I had to censor a lot of this video. And well, just about every other video I make, I had to cut a lot of it out. So I'd like to upload the uncut versions as well. So going forward, any uncut videos will be posted there first. Additionally, I'll be posting all my private videos, weekly updates, new topics, and just general interaction. Advertising myself is something that is very new to me. It feels kind of weird. So if you do decide to join my Patreon, I'm giving away 50 stickers to the first 50 patrons as a show of my gratitude. You have no idea how much I appreciate y'all's support. Now, back to the video. Just outside of the city of Matamoros, Hidden among miles of open fields and dirt roads, sat a property known as Rancho Santa Elena. And to most people, it looked like any other ranch in the Tamaulipas countryside. A few buildings, a corral, a livestock pen, and a long, winding road that seemed to lead nowhere. But something about this place felt off. Neighbors, mostly farmers, kept their distance. Some claimed they heard gunshots at night. Others reported strange chanting. Most just knew to stay away. Nobody knew what the owners of this ranch were up to. Until in April of 1989, just a few weeks after the disappearance of Mark, Mexican federales had set up a checkpoint near Matamoros, part of an operation targeting drunk traffickers moving marijuana and cocaine through the region. On April 1st, a truck approached the checkpoint, and instead of stopping, it blew right through, accelerating into the night. Officers pursued. The chase led them down a long dirt path, dust clouds rising, until the vehicle crossed onto private land, Rancho Santa Elena. The officers didn't enter right away. They noted the location, reported up the chain, and returned with backup. Upon entering the ranch, federales searched the property. But then officers noticed a small structure at the edge of the property. A deteriorating tool shed that looked out of place amongst the main buildings. And this shed would soon become the center of the investigation. The officers felt uneasy around it. The wood was rotting. A stench lingered in the air. And something felt wrong. They opened the door. What they found inside would stun the world. Inside the ritual shed, the air inside was suffocating. Animal bones were scattered in piles. Strange symbols had been smeared across the walls. And in the corner sat a large iron cauldron. And inside was blood, human bones, animal parts, and the decomposing brain of a human victim. Some of the responding officers described it as such. It was horrible. It was like a human slaughterhouse. I've been an investigator for 15 years, and it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. With the discovery of the ritual shed, the investigation escalated instantly. Authorities searched the rest of the ranch, checking barns, fields, and irrigation ditches. They noticed patches of disturbed soil near the cornfield, freshly turned earth, grave sites, and they began to dig. The first body was found shallow in the earth, dismembered and decaying, mutilated. Then came the second, then the third. One after another, bodies began to surface, some wrapped, some bound, some missing limbs or organs. Investigators began piecing together what happened. They found out that victims were brought here and made to suffer, offered up as ritual sacrifices for spiritual protection against rival gangs or police. And in order for these spells to work, the cult had to inflict as much pain as possible. It was believed that the louder the screams, the better the result. By the end of the 2 days, 12 bodies had been exhumed, a number later cited in virtually every 1989 news report, with more to be found. However, for one of the graves, they noticed a wire sticking out of the dirt. And upon digging, they found the remains of a spinal cord attached at the end of this wire, along with various bones scattered around. They sent the skull off for investigation, and forensics returned a match. The teeth inside of the skull matched the dental records of missing American college student, Mark Kilroy. They had found him, but the nightmare had just begun to unfold. What investigators found at Rancho Santa Elena would reveal a criminal operation unlike anything seen before. But this ranch was only the beginning, because the people behind it were far more dangerous, far more organized, and far more delusional than anyone could have imagined. With the bodies now uncovered at Rancho Santa Elena, investigators were left with a single question. Who could have done this? And the answer would lead them into the darkest corners of Mexico's occult underworld. Before the cult became infamous, there was a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. Constanzo was born in Miami to Cuban parents, raised around Afro-Cuban spiritual practices, and from a young age, he was drawn to the Palo Mayombe, a religion centered around ancestral spirits, ritual offerings, and a cauldron. A sacred cauldron believed to hold spiritual power. But Constanzo twisted these beliefs. He saw magic not as a religion, but as a weapon. Apprenticing under experienced practitioners, he learned how to perform rituals, read signs, and promise protection to anyone who would pay him. Among the people Constanzo drew into his orbit was Sara Maria Aldrete, someone who lived a life split between Brownsville and Matamoros, able to move freely across the border. Constanzo saw potential in her. Charismatic, authoritative, dual identity access. He brought her in and elevated her quickly. Soon she wasn't just a follower. She became his second in command, and she became known as La Madrina, or the Godmother, or as some would later call her, La Bruja. Together, they formed the leadership of a criminal occult organization the media would later name Los Narcos Satánicos, or the Narco-Satanists. And as the cult began to form, the group didn't start with human sacrifices. At first, Constanzo offered spiritual services, cleansing rituals, fortune-telling, and protection ceremonies for drug traffickers. But as the smuggling operations grew, so did Constanzo's demands. He claimed the cauldron needed more, stronger sacrifices, more powerful offerings. The cult members, drawn from a mix of traffickers, their families, and loyal followers, followed him without question. Rituals became darker. Violence escalated. Animal sacrifices turned into human ones. With the horrors of Rancho Santa Elena finally uncovered, investigators had one objective: find the people responsible. The ranch was only the beginning. The cauldron, the graves, the ritual shed, all of it pointed to a larger, organized group, and the leaders of that group were still out there. In the days following the discovery, Mexican authorities began rounding up low-level members of the Hernandez family. Interrogations began immediately. Some members denied everything. Others broke down and confessed parts of what they had seen, and a few of them gave investigators exactly what they needed. Police realized they weren't dealing with a simple drug operation. They were hunting a cult. And as the investigation intensified, Constanzo fled Matamoros. He knew the ranch was compromised. He knew bodies had been found. And he knew the feds were closing in fast. He gathered his closest followers, including Martin Quintana and Omar Orea, and escaped to Mexico City, nearly 500 miles away. They hid in an upscale apartment on Rio Sena Street, located in the wealthy Polanco district. And to avoid suspicion, the group stayed inside. Curtains closed, lights dimmed, no noise. But the paranoia began to consume Constanzo. He ordered constant rituals, burning candles, chanting, and cleansing ceremonies, believing the police were using magic to find him. The walls of the apartment began to close in around him. And back in Matamoros, the Federales continued arresting cult members. More statements, more confessions, more names. The picture became clearer. Constanzo was the mastermind. Aldrete was second in command, and the cult was far larger than expected. And a chance encounter breaks the case. It wasn't a grand operation or major sting that exposed Constanzo. It was something much simpler. A neighbor in the building heard shouts and objects breaking inside the apartment. She called the police, assuming it was a domestic dispute. When officers arrived, Costanzo panicked. He opened fire, and bullets ripped through the walls and shattered the windows, exposing the cult's presence immediately. The apartment was surrounded. What began as a noise complaint became the final standoff of the narco-Satanists. Then Costanzo realized the truth. He would not escape this time. His protection spells had failed. His cauldron had lost its power. He turned to one of his most devoted followers. Costanzo gave him his final order to kill him. Costanzo was killed instantly, along with his lover and close lieutenant, Martin Quintana. The reign of El Padrino ended by his own command. And in the days that followed, remaining members were hunted down. Testimony poured in, trials were prepared, and victims were identified. And the full scope of the cult became known. Los Narcos Satánicos, once feared, protected by superstition, rumored to be unstoppable, were dismantled in weeks. Their sanctuary had fallen, their magic had failed them, and their empire had collapsed. But it wasn't over. Soon the American people would experience a new wave of fear. By 1989, America was already afraid. Across the country, rumors of satanic cults had spread for years. Daycare abuse allegations, missing children on milk cartons, evangelical preachers claiming dark forces were everywhere, talk shows chasing shock value for ratings. The 1980s was a decade obsessed with danger. Serial killers, occult rumors, heavy metal music being blamed for corruption. Fear was already in the bloodstream. And then Matamoros happened. When the story broke, and when the news anchors reported a ranch filled with bodies, when they showed investigators discovering a human brain inside a pot, America didn't see a cartel. They saw something else. Satan. The word spread faster than the facts. News stations across the United States ran segments with lurid headlines. Satanic murders in Mexico. Devil cult near the US border. Human sacrifices linked to drug rituals. The Matamoros case had become the flashpoint. It was no longer just an investigation. It was a symbol. A terrifying confirmation of everything that Americans had been primed to fear. And talk shows used this case as an evidence of a satanic network. Geraldo Rivera, a popular talk show host at the time, had just released a special.
The Investigative News Group presents the Geraldo Rivera Special.
Whether or Satan exists is a matter of belief, but we are certain that Satanism exists. To some it's a religion, to others it's the practice of evil in the devil's name. It exists, and it's flourishing. Members of our studio audience tonight will attest to that. They are friends.
Devil worship, exposing Satan's underground, just 5 months before Mark went missing. This special had already launched a wave of fear. But with Matamoros, there was now proof a satanic crime was real. Local news stations exaggerated the details. National outlets conflated Palo Mayombe with Satanism. The truth didn't matter anymore. The imagery of a ritual shed in Mexico, the cauldron, the grave sites, that's what stuck. And for many Americans, this wasn't just a crime story. It was a sign of the apocalypse. Across the United States, parents panicked. Schools held meetings. Churches hosted occult awareness seminars. And police departments launched occult crime units. Teachers were told to watch for signs of satanic influence in students. Black clothing, heavy metal music, interest in scary movies. And the scariest sign of them all, Dungeons and Dragons. Anything unusual or misunderstood became a threat. And the fear moved far faster than reality. Lost in the hysteria was the truth. The cult was not satanic. There was not a cult in every suburb. The Matamoros group was a criminal organization, not a religious army. Their rituals were a twisted bastardization of Afro-Cuban practices, not biblical devil worship. But the public didn't care. Fear is louder than facts. And in 1989, fear was everywhere. The Matamoros case kept appearing again and again. A real-world example used to justify imaginary fears. It didn't matter that the details didn't match. It didn't matter that Constanzo wasn't a Satanist. It didn't matter that the cult had no ties to American daycares or suburbs. But the damage was already done. An entire decade had been shaped by fear. Fear fueled by misunderstanding, media sensationalism, and a story from a ranch in Mexico that America twisted into something far larger than reality. The cult at Rancho Santa Elena was real. The horror was real. The murders were real. But the panic that followed, the fear of hidden satanic networks, the belief that the devil was lurking in every shadow, this was something that America created on its own. A nightmare, born not from the truth, but from fear.
Never been a sinner, I never sinned.